What is up, guys? Archangel Manga here. Today I'm going to be giving you my first impressions of the first 10 volumes of Kentaro Miura's Berserk. Now, some of you may be already aware, if you watch my videos on a regular basis, that I did a special video of the purchase of the first volume of Berserk. That wasn't too long ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, I'd say. So, I've been doing a lot of buying. Berserk is a series that I've held off for the longest of time. It's just literally been on, it's taken a backseat in priority. That's namely for the cost of each individual volume, because I don't tend to go for dark horse manga because it's usually more expensive than your regular tankobon. But I finally took the plunge and started investing in this series, and I do not regret it. for the price. The story more than makes up for it. I can definitely say, because this series is absolutely incredible, and I say that with 100% confidence. Berserk is incredible. Now, I know I've only read the first 10 volumes. Well, technically I've read the first 13 volumes, but this is just my review of the first 10 volumes. I'll probably do an up-to-date video of this, when I've read probably the whole series that's been released so far, all the 37 volumes or something like that. But what is Berserk? Berserk starts out with sort of a prologue, and we're introduced to a lone wanderer, a swordsman called Guts. Now, Guts, he's got a really bad attitude, he's really angry, and he carries a massive black sword. And he's on a quest for vengeance against a man who branded him with a mark of sacrifice. Now, a mark of sacrifice is a branding that he's got on his neck that summons demons who want to basically devour him and soul included and drag him down to hell. So he has to defend himself from the forces of evil and the endless pits of death with nothing but a sword. One thing you notice about Guts straight away is that his body is covered in scars. He's missing an arm, and he's missing his right eye. I believe it's his right eye. And like I said, he's got a really, really bad attitude. He thoroughly believes that anybody who's weaker, or just weak in general, that doesn't deserve to live. If they can't defend themselves, then what is the point in them living? So, from the get-go, Guts comes across as a really selfish, arrogant, kind of a prick, extremely unlikable. And that can really be a little bit of a pitfall for the first 2 or 3 volumes, because this little prologue arc just follows Guts defeating these demonic monsters called apostles, which use their demonic powers in order to manipulate humankind and just basically feast on humans and things like that. And it just follows, we just see Guts slaying them one after the other. That's one thing that's also noted about this series. It's extremely violent. So yeah, that's probably one of the weakest aspects of the first few volumes, is the fact that Guts is a very incredibly unlikable character. Then after the prologue, we get to learn more about his backstory, and we're given context to why he is the way he is. The backstory arc, the Golden Age arc, starts out literally from the birth of Guts, and he is just a bad omen from the start. Or that's how it's believed to be. As the way he was born is probably the most disturbing way a child has come into the world of the living that I've ever read or experienced. He was born from a mother who was already dead. She was hung from a tree, and he basically fell out of a rotting corpse into a pool of blood and mud, and was found by a band of mercenaries while he was literally just laying there, with his umbilical cord, lying in afterbirth blood and mud. That is just the most gruesome birth ever. So he grew up with a band of mercenaries, learning to fight from probably, the moment I could walk. He had a sword in his hand. is in battle after battle after battle. Battle is all he knows. Killing is all he knows from a very early age. So his mind is conditioned to kill from a very early age. He's in effect brainwashed to think that way. So he just grows up on the battlefield essentially. Some really disturbing things happen to him, which makes you a lot more sympathetic towards him as a character. And then eventually, when he gets up into his teenage years, he comes across the strongest mercenary group in the world that Berserk is set in. That's the Band of the Hawk. Ends up dueling the leader of the Band of the Hawk, the enigmatic and charismatic Griffith, who ends up becoming his sort of equal rival sort of thing. Ends up dueling with him, loses to Griffith, and ends up joining the Band of the Hawk. And from that moment is where the character development really starts for Guts, because it's the first time in his life that he's experienced any sort of element of camaraderie and friendship and longing to be with other people. He's always been like a lone wanderer and never been able to connect with like other people, but once he joins the Band of the Hawks, he almost gains a family. And we really see Guts shine, from being a really standoffish, cold-hearted, brutal mercenary to, somebody who people rely on, and, a person who finds people he can rely on. So this series is what I didn't expect from it. Was its excellent use of character development, and it's how the characters drive the plot. I was expecting just bloody violence, which is something I've become kind of desensitized to when reading manga and watching anime, because there's just so much violence. But this series sets the standard for how violence should really be used, because the violence serves the story rather than the story serving the violence. And that's something I can definitely praise Kentaro Miura for, his ability to portray not only like bloody violence but sexual violence towards children. Really, really grotesque violence, but use it with context. And yes, it can make you feel uncomfortable, and yes, it can make you think, wow, this is pushing it way, way, way beyond the bar, but the characters and the story itself more than make up for it. The Guts becomes a really sympathetic character, to the point where I'm at now in the story. I've really warmed to Guts as a character, and he seems like a really, really cool guy, even though really messed up things happen to him. The setting in which Berserk resides, it's like a fictional version of medieval Europe. It's set in a place called Midland, where there are like fantasy elements, but it's really grounded in reality, because the source material for things like armor, weaponry, war tactics, and just the kind of setup for like how everything's built is grounded in real life. He's taking inspiration from real life sources. I believe Guts is actually loosely based on a real German mercenary from the Middle Ages. So yeah, it does have its fantasy elements. We're introduced to like creatures like elves, demons, devils. There's probably loads more fantastical creatures to come into it and come into the play. But for a fantasy setting, it's realistic in the sense that it doesn't have a heavy use of magic or anything like that. No like sort of spells being cast, or nothing being summoned or anything like that. It does feel really, really realistic. Now, if I had to describe what genre Berserk could place itself in, then obviously it would be like fantasy, action, but also I would probably say it could fall in the genre of tragedy, because there are many tragic elements to the story, and like what happens to some of the characters, and its themes of death and how that's portrayed. Something really Shakespearean about that, like almost like Macbeth. I think it actually has been quite influenced by like plays and Shakespeare sort of thing like that, like Macbeth. Because Guts comes across people who sort of either help him in his journey, or accommodate to his needs in one way or another. And through interacting with Guts and being an assistant to him, it always ends up being their downfall in a way. We're introduced to characters, just like minor characters. This isn't really spoilers or anything. Just like minor characters who end up assisting Guts, for like maybe a chapter or two, they end up dying at the hands of the demons or devils that end up trying to consume Guts, because Guts can't protect everybody. Guts can only protect himself, and that's probably where he gets the mentality of anybody who's weak doesn't deserve to live from, because he knows that he can't protect anybody, so he doesn't really bother trying. Now, the art, at first I was quite disappointed with the art, because in the first 3 volumes, Miura seems to use heavy-handed line work, way too much screen tone, which can really bog down the artwork and the imagery, just in like big blocks of dark colours. So sometimes it's difficult to differentiate what's background from what's foreground. That can make it really difficult, to kind of get with. But it has a very progressive art style, which is something you see a lot with mangaka who have ongoing series. The artwork will start, almost amateurish, and then compare the early artwork to later volumes. The artwork will drastically change, and that happens very quickly in Berserk. Once you get into like the backstory arc, up to by the time you get to volume 10, you're just accustomed to how great the artwork is, because the artwork progresses at a massive level. Such attention to detail in like the hair and shading and the backgrounds and the armor, and his skills in like sort of choreography, to choreograph battles and sword fights and things like that. He uses line work just masterfully. In the later volumes, that I've read. One thing that's noteworthy is as well, in his artwork, is his portrayal of like damage and like weathering on like armor and things like that. If you see somebody with like a minor cut or a dent in the armor, then that will stay consistent. When you see characters like that again, they will still have dents and stuff in their armor, like where they were placed before. So he's got a real acute attention to detail, and that really shows in his panel work as well. This is probably one of the first mangas that I've read where panels like almost on every single page overlap each other. There's other YouTubers like Immortalima are always mentioning like dynamic panel arrangements, on like the pages and things like that, and that really shines in Kentaro Miura's work, and his attention to boom pages and his use of boom pages when there's a dramatic moment. He always uses boom pages, whether a single boom page or a double boom page, side by side. He always uses them correctly in like dramatic moments, rather than just overusing them just to sort of like fill up space. He uses them to their greatest effect. So yeah, well, what more could I really say about Berserk? I really loved it. Obviously it's a seinen, it's aimed at mature readers. I could arguably say it's creeping up to one of my favourite seinens of all time, because it's just so different. It's a Japanese take on European mythology and folklore and things like that. There are characters like an elf who Guts meets called Puck, who basically serve as like the voice of the audience, like explaining things, just expository, information, exposition that the reader needs. And Puck serves as like a comedic relief, because there are elements of comedy in this series, but it's very dark comedy. So yeah, Puck serves as like comedic relief and like a voice for the audience, because he actually comments on the fact that Guts seems like the kind of man you would only hear about in like folklore or mythology. So yeah, there's multiple uses of like different narratives in the story. Where Guts has a lot of like inner dialogue. They kind of develop by themselves, but also develop by interaction with other sort of characters and things like that. There's a really sort of close-knit web of different factions and people who interact with each other and develop from that. So this series definitely has a lot of potential, and I think I'm definitely going to enjoy it, because the backstory lasts for quite a while. And funnily enough for me, it didn't feel slow paced at all. I just breezed through these volumes. I think the backstory lasts about 10 volumes, because I'm currently actually on volume 13. So yeah, I feel like I've said all I need to say on this series. Drop me your thoughts in the comment section below. If there actually, if there is actually anybody who disagrees with me, or doesn't like this series for whatever reason, let me know in the comment section as well. Obviously no spoilers because I've only read up to volume 13. So until then, Archangel Manga signing out.